All right, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and head off into the final panel session of the symposium this evening, and just want to start moving through that. I know there's going to be some people trickling in and out just based on good conversations that are taking place outside. This final session right here is really the answer for the other side of, great, we just learned a tremendous amount of information. There's been some great conversations. There are some exceedingly intelligent people that have shared phenomenal information up to this point. Great things have been shared. And the question becomes, so what? So what? What are we going to do with this going forward? We know in the state of Texas, most property is owned by private landowners. So that's going to be the focus of our last session here today of what that looks like going forward. And just to give you guys, everybody in the room, a setup, I have an overarching question that the symposium committee came up with that we're going to put out as the overarching session to this overarching question for this whole session. And then we're going to go into and just ask some general questions. We originally set this up to where everybody would answer every question. I think the value that's going to come out of this afternoon, we're not going to do that. You know, so what's better than changing midstream a well-oiled plan? What we're going to do is we're going to ask a few questions to get some questions started. And then after everybody has a chance to kind of take a look at that first question and cover that first one, well, then we're going to go ahead and head off in and open it up to individuals in the audience. And what I just said was private land ownership is probably the most important component of this, and therefore the private landowners are the most important component in this discussion. I would really like to make sure and draw that out. We get a lot of people that do this professionally in some capacity. Well, the private landowners professionally do this on the land every day as the land stewards. So I would like to encourage that, and the master naturalists and those individuals that do that. Not saying going to weed anybody out, but I would really like to encourage those folks who may not ask a question from that category to please do that. So with that, I would like to go ahead and start by opening up the land management and Ashe Juniper ecosystems, integrating science with landowner and stewardship goals. I'd like to introduce our panel this evening. Jared Messick is Texas State University. Jared has earned his PhD studying the human dimensions of wildlife at Texas State University. He is passionate about conducting research to bridge the gaps between wildlife conservation and public well-being, and has studied the interactions between landowners, conservation policies, and the environment in East Central Texas since 2019. Blake Murden with Shield Ranch. Blake Murden is the CEO of Shield Land Stewardship Group, where he is responsible for land stewardship and management of the 3 Shield ranches comprising 37,000 acres in Central and West Texas. Blake earned a master's and PhD in wildlife and fishery science from Texas A&M University, and has more than 30 years of experience managing, researching, and monitoring land, water, and wildlife resources on private lands. Elizabeth McGreevy is the author of Wanted: Mountain Cedars, Dead and Alive, the founding executive director of Project Bedrock, and the owner of Land Steward, a hill country-based land management planning business. She received an MLA in environmental planning from Texas A&M and an undergraduate degree in biology from Randolph College in Virginia. Finally, we have Daniel Oppenheimer, who is the land program director of the Hill Country Alliance and coordinator of the Camp Bulla Sentinel Landscape Partnership. So, since 2017, Daniel has worked with private landowners, agency and nonprofit partners, and communities across the Texas Hill Country to support private land stewardship and conservation. The overarching question that we would like to box this conversation into this afternoon is, how can we, as conservationists and other stakeholders interested in thoughtful Ashe Juniper management, do a better job of working with private landowners to integrate science into decisions regarding Ashe Juniper management? How are we going to do a better job of working with private landowners? So I'm actually going to pose this question to everybody in the group because I think it's important to get everybody's perspective. But what are the top challenges or barriers to successful implementation of science and management in Ashe Juniper ecosystems? And I'll let Daniel, who grabbed the microphone first, go first.
I was told I was the sacrificial lamb, so here we go. Hi everybody, Daniel Oppenheimer, Hill Country Alliance. I get to work with landowners all across Central Texas. I'll just start with 2 things. I don't want to steal too much thunder from my fellow panelists. The first challenge, I think, is a question of scale. We are working to do natural resources conservation in one of the fastest growing regions in the country. My coworker, Rachel, we do a lot of work in the Pedernales River Basin, and so we were curious. This was about a year or two ago. We went to the appraisal district in Blanco County, just curious, how many people have bought property in this just northern part of Blanco County in the last couple of years? Any guesses? 1,821 people or parcels that were under new ownership in just a couple of years. So how do we meaningfully engage new landowners, not in that small part of Blanco County, but for those of us invested in the hill country across 17, 18 counties and more than 10 million acres? That, to me, is one of the biggest challenges. The other challenge I'll mention is that, and I'm sorry I couldn't be here yesterday or this morning, but I think as professionals, our temptation is to take what we know and share that and educate the landowner. I think it's a challenge, but incredibly important. As Steve, I think you may have underscored in your how you kicked things off yesterday, is we need to be curious and open, listening to and learning from landowners, because if we don't understand their goals, their values, what they're trying to do on their land, it doesn't matter how good our science is. So I'll just stick with those 2 points.
I'm good for now.
Oh, anybody else?
Well, first I want to say thank you to the for inviting me here, but also to the symposium coordinators. This is a lot of work to put together, and especially Patty and David. I know you did a lot of work behind the scenes to pull this together, and so hats off to the committee and you for putting this together. It takes a lot to get all the speakers lined up and all this organized, so thank you. There's been so much information, it's almost overwhelming. And Steve, I tried to, keep an open mind, but it blew my mind of all the information. So, and trying to digest that and set aside bias. We all have our own opinions about how land should be managed, right? And I'll say that, I came up through the A&M system, and a lot of the juniper research was happening, back in the 90s and early 2000. I just dated myself, but a lot of my mentors were those professors that were doing that research on juniper, Ashe Juniper, and redberry juniper, because I was out west some of that, but. Anyway, so to hear new ideas and new thoughts on what I thought was basically the rule on how to manage juniper, is definitely that there's some new information out there. So to answer the question, Todd, I think I want to there's a young lady, I think I see her right here, that asked the last question to the last speaker. And that was, she went online and she's trying to find information. I think you're an environmental educator. And I think the challenge is that there's a lot of information out there and it doesn't all jive, right? Even the scientific literature, and there's a lot of this was pointed out in your book, Elizabeth, but, I think we really have to understand that you can't take one study and take things out of context, right? You really need to read that scientific, research, that particular study, and understand all the, it depends quotes at the end in the discussion section, and further research needed is typically what's there. So, what I'd like to see is if there was a way for all of our state and federal agencies to come together in some form or fashion to all get on the same page, because what's going out to landowners is somewhat of a jumbled mess, quite frankly. Or even the NRCS, they need more staff. They know that. Texas Parks and Wildlife, we need more biologists out there talking to landowners. And I mean, they've got to all get on the same page. And that's the challenge. And some of it is antiquated information, and some of it's new. But again, if we can somehow deliver the best available science and the best management practices to our landowners, I think that would get us a long way down the road.
Okay, I'll go ahead and say something. So Elizabeth McGreevy, and I kind of come at this from two angles. One is for the past 25 years, I have been going out and talking, trying to change people's minds about the Ashe Juniper, mountain cedars. At one point I had someone throw their lunch at me. I've been heckled. So it was really, really tough in the beginning, but ever since my book came out and I went gray, I've been taken more seriously. But it also has more to do with, Bill Neiman with Native American Seed said, Elizabeth, before you go to the politicians, the leaders, you need to build an army. And I think we're doing that today, is that you have to get, the troops behind you and to start to instill change. And I see Christine Middleton, who's been a big part in getting with the Hays County Master Naturalist. She came to me and she published a brochure, and then Carl's father, Fletcher, has been buying up to 50 books of mine, walking them to all of his neighbors. So my army is there. Whenever I give a talk, it is a much better response, but there's still, I speak to everyone from tambourine shakers to far-right conservatives. But they're all there with one thing, is they want to know, how can we do better? Because they know what they've been told to do has been causing more damage on top of this karst country region. So they're listening, they are ready to be told. But you can't come and blame them. They didn't know. This is what they were told. This is what the media said. This is what the agencies told them, is that we do need to change what we're telling landowners and how we inform them. They are so ready to do something better. If we just map it out and fund it, then I think we can really make the changes that we need to. Oh, wait,
All right.
over there.
I'm okay. Any other? Okay. What do the social sciences say about the subject of working with private landowners to better integrate science? And how have you seen the outreach to landowners change over time?
It's all you, but
You can't dug that one, sorry.
well, I can't speak very well. I'm Jared. It's good to meet you guys. Thank you for having me. I can't really speak too much to the change over time part of things, but I think that we can approach this from a variety of levels. And at the very, very surface level, we got to understand that there's a lack of awareness that circulates in communities that can really prevent people from taking the best care of their property. And my research, as far as our case studies and our projects go, hasn't really dealt with Ashe Juniper ecosystems. But to prepare for that work, I did a whole bunch of research about, what's actually going on. What do people say about, conservation on ag lands? What does the literature say about endangered species across the nation? And one thing that comes up in the majority of the studies is that a lack of awareness is a huge barrier, but really that's kind of just on the surface, right? Because if we go give this person some information, we give them a pamphlet about something, that's not necessarily going to change their behavior. Arming people with information and knowledge is not a very effective way to change their behavior. So we have to get at something like some of these very deep-seated conflicts that could exist. And when we start to tackle those issues, like I talked about in my presentation this morning, I think those are where we can start to leverage and see some behavior change. But what Elizabeth was saying, I've noticed that landowners really, really do want to take good care of their property. I think the thing is that means so many different things to so many different people. So we have to get in there and understand what taking care of the land looks like to a different person, and then figure out how we as researchers and practitioners and agencies can go in there and actually leverage their desire to take care of their property with something that can improve outcomes for wildlife and endangered species. That's all I got.
I'll add something as a pseudo-social scientist. I think, to Blake's point, we can and will get a lot further if we're singing from the same hymn book and have consistent and clear messaging on these issues. I think that will get us far. And at the same time, we've seen in all sorts of regional and global issues, there's this temptation to think if we just get the science right, then we'll get the good policy or we'll get the good management decisions. And in some cases, the world is a lot more complicated than that. And so I think, yes, we absolutely need to get clear and consistent on, what these new scientific takeaways are. And we also need to be thinking about how do we integrate social science? How do we work with the complexity for people who, you can give them 1 million brochures, and if their worldview is Ashe Juniper is bad, and I was taught that by my dad and my grandfather, and pure science may not be the answer. And so I think we need to look to the social sciences, look to our environmental educators, and to the study of scientific communication. There was an article someone shared with me recently by Anne Toomey. I'm just going to read the title, but the title in and of itself is very informative. Facts don't change minds. Social networks, group dialogue, and stories do. So I think, yes, we need to get the science clear and compelling, but then how we share that, how do we connect with people's values and their networks is a whole other part of the story too.
I'll just mention that some change that I've seen over time is really has to do with, let's face it, now there's social media. We've got the internet. People can Google, get information, at their fingertips, sometimes not good information. The other thing that I've noticed, and hats off to, organizations like HCA, but a lot of conservation organizations have, and let's say, Texas A&M, NRI, groups like that have really stepped up to provide information and good information that they are putting together and pushing out to landowners. But I think one thing that hasn't changed, sitting here, this just dawned on me, is that we continue to somewhat preach to the choir. We oftentimes, have symposiums like this, and I don't remember how many people raise their hand as landowners, but boy, I'd love to see this room packed with landowners. We got to get the word out, and one way that I can just share a bit about what we do at Shield Ranch is we open our gates. We really try to it could be individuals that just ask to come see what we're doing. It could be groups. A good example is Texas Wildlife Association. They came up with this small landowner, big opportunity kind of seminar series, if you will. And I ran into a gentleman at lunch today he said, "Oh, Shield Ranch. I came out there for one of the events. We let them come on and hosted that." But those are the kind of things that I think we really need to understand the kind of some of the new, I don't know if it's called demographics or that we've got new types of landowners, right? We've got generational transfer. We've got landowners that are coming in just buying, big ranches for recreational and investment ventures. But, they're all, and we've got a lot of small landers. A lot of lands are getting, divided up, as you mentioned, and parsed up. And these landowners are, they're eager for good information. They also want help, because it's one thing to read something and even be told, but got to help them implement. That's where oftentimes I hear they just can't make that next step. They read about it, they say, "Oh, this is what I'm supposed to do," but they don't have the connections, they don't have the network to get the resources, whether it's contractors or just technical guidance on the ground. So I think that's some changes I've seen and some hope for the future.
Yeah, no, and it's starting to happen. I mean, like with the Project Bedrock thing I did, I saw that that was a definite lack, and so I've been trying to develop a working partner network of well-vetted potential contractors who are doing all kinds of work to, and do like nature-based solutions, regenerative agriculture. Things are really going to help to improve the health of this karst country, area where the Ashe Juniper is growing. But when it comes down to it, the best way to help landowners really is to go to their land. And it's exhausting, as Daniel knows. And it's exhausting because it is, but because the hill country is so diverse, you really have to go to each property. And it could be fun. It'd be great if someone asked me once, can we get more of you? Because we need to train more people to do this, to go out and help them. I had this one landowner up in Taos, Texas, who had me go up there. He said, yeah, I have all these cedars on the top of the hill. What should I do with them? And I just want to plow a big old pathway through them. And I walked him through, and I said, well, actually, let's look under these trees. Oh, look, there's some red oaks, there's a cedar elm. Let's not go here. And said, okay, there's nothing underneath these bushy junipers. Okay, then you can take that one out. So you do it very carefully. And I showed him how to do it on contour. You come around a corner. There's a group of lace cactus. It's like, oh, here's a rock outcropping. So it's showing them, giving them that kind of guidance in the field. It doesn't mean you have to. I was there for 2 days. And that was enough. He turns around to me at the end and he says, you mean you're just asking me to be a good land steward? I said, exactly.
I have one other question for the group. And we have a lot of existing things, state organizations, programs, incentives, all these kinds of things. But what are innovations that are needed right now to better connect this? Training sessions, landowners, natural resource professionals, tools, resources, changes to programs. What are the innovations that are needed? The next step, you bunch of visionaries.
I'm going to go because county extension agents, Texas AgriLife, and NRCS, all the lower people, all the ones, the top people are in line with what's going on. We got some people here talking today, and they will concede that is the case. All the ones that are going out and meeting with the landowners, they need to be trained. They need to be educated and all get them all on the same page so they're all telling the same story. And to me, that's one of the biggest things that needs to happen.
We're working on publishing that point right now in our lab. We did a really cool study at some workshops that Texas Parks hosted back in the summer of 2022. And we tried to develop a way that in the field at a workshop, agencies can implement this kind of like icebreaker game almost, but at the same time, they're going to segment workshop participants into groups so that they can effectively give the right message to the right people. Because we know that we can't just give information to everyone in the room and have it stick the way it needs to each and every person, right? So I think we need to train the agency people that are going door to door every day, because they're the people that make the change. Like, making a connection with a person that comes to your land is so important to changing behavior. I mean, the anecdote that I shared earlier, this landowner was not interested in endangered species conservation programs whatsoever, but he had a buddy that worked for Fish and Wildlife Service, and he got him on board and enrolled in the program. Now this guy does grassroots stuff all on his own. So training those people, not just in the science and the best management practices, but teaching them how to have some of these interpersonal skills, the importance of meeting people where they are, and the actual strategy that's involved in doing so. In a project that we're rolling out in 2024, we're actually going to offer training opportunities to agency staff, because we're trying to get them involved in all of our research efforts. And I want to hand it to Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. As an agency, they funded us for like 5 years. and their willingness to implement new strategies to meet landowners where they are has been super, super awesome and super encouraging. Like, they literally let us design flyers for them based on the findings of, or preliminary findings of unpublished work, which may sound risky now that I'm saying it like that. But it was awesome, and we did have a great turnout at these workshops. So I think training is huge.
One innovation that I know is coming is, or I say innovation, it's using technology. So a video series that Texas Parks and Wildlife, again, I applaud them as well. They're great partners, doing amazing things. But they are, you heard Shane talk about 1D1 wildlife, and they are coming out with a video series that are going to touch on those 7 practices, and they're going to be updated. So I know that I'm on a committee that we're helping to kind of bring that into the next, into the future, because when those were written, it was somewhat it was just a different time. They don't mention things like, feral pigs, and I mean, it's just exotics, or invasive species, that's what it's called. But there's a lot more to that, right? And so we can't necessarily, or Texas Parks and Wildlife can't necessarily change the wording of that. I mean, they're going to try, but, that gets into going to the comptroller's office and that sort of thing. But what they can do is they can expand on each one of those. That's going to be a video series. I think that's going to touch a lot of people, a lot of landowners, because we know a lot of them utilize the 1D1. So I just wanted to mention that.
Good. Okay. Well, everybody on the panel said they'd like to hear themselves speak, but more importantly, they want to hear questions from you. So I'm going to ask you as a collective group, and what insights did you gain from the symposium that might help answer this overarching question of working with private landowners? Or is there a burning question you have for a panel member? And if you'll ask it, I'll repeat it so we have it recorded for the video, and then, yes, sir.
For David, now that you have those 1,200 plus names and lists from the appraisal district, what is the Hill Country Alliance going to do with that information? Are you going to send them a welcome wagon pamphlet or anything to say that this is possible resource that you should do before you start tearing up your property? I run into landowners who are fearful of government agencies coming in who think they're going to help, and people are afraid they're going to be dictated to and required by law to make changes to their property.
And those were some of the realities I was hinting at in some of my earlier comments. You've got to meet landowners where they're at, speak to their goals and values. What are we doing with that information? In some respects, we're experimenting. We took maybe 100 of those names and we sent them some of our educational materials, actually that Steve and others helped us develop on just good land stewardship, gave them our contact information. I think we heard from 0 people. And so one of the things that we learned is that, perhaps there needs to be a specific call to action. Hey, we host our Pernalis landowner potluck every spring, so maybe in addition to sharing some good educational materials, perhaps we need to include a specific call to action. Hey, we're hosting this landowner potluck at this ranch at this time, and bring some potato salad. Here's the address. Hope to see you there. So we're still figuring out how best to reach and connect with those people. And I don't have the perfect answers yet. So.
Yes, ma'am.
This is not so much of a question that I'm a landowner and a master.
Would you like the microphone?
I think the first thing, one, it's just been great to come here today because what it has made me realize once again is how much I don't know that I don't know. Also, what the people and the agencies that I don't know. Because that's probably the most difficult thing as a landowner is there is a lot more help that we do not know we can access. And so, I've got
And I would think it would be to everybody's benefit if you must have a metric that say every time you go out, every resource is provided by any resource that comes in this. It takes years to make contact.
Can I respond to that?
Can I just put one quick note in the video that not knowing what you don't know, not aware of all the resources that are available to you, and then probably the availability of everybody telling everybody about all the other resources that are available at every office they stop by. And then finally, I loved your comment, innovation, being available when landowners are available, not 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, but when they are available. Thank you very much for that. Go ahead, Daniel.
Awesome feedback. My response is actually not directly to y'all as landowners. It's more to all the practitioners in the audience. We actually stole this idea from some folks in Hayes County, but Hill Country Alliance has for about 5 years been hosting an event in Gillespie County called Kolaches and Conservation. Very simple idea. We get all of those agency resources into one single place at the same time. We get the Soil and Water Conservation District, the local NRCS district conservationist, the forester, the Texas Parks and Wildlife biologist, even the Groundwater Conservation District. All up front, there's coffee, there's kolaches. We all introduce ourselves and say who we are and what we do. We shut up, and then we let the landowners ask whatever questions they have. They can stay the whole time. If they need to get to that second job, they can just ask a question, grab a kolache, and head out the door. And so it's been a neat model in Gillespie County, and it would be neat to see that pop up in other counties too.
Oh, may I make another comment? We're in Lancaster County, we're never included in, Central Texas. And, Hill Country Alliance, I've probably talked to a few of your people about that. Oh, I'm sorry. Anyway, I don't know where Lampasas stands on the list, but we always feel a little left out. So everything happens in Gillespie and Travis, and we're over there on the edge.
The young lady right there. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Yeah, Hayes County. So one of the things I see with a lot of the programs is they're geared towards the larger landowners. And, who I deal with are the 5 to 30 acre landowners, the smaller landowners. How can we get more information that's applicable to those kind of landowners who don't really, they probably can't afford to bring in bulldozers and do big projects. They just want to do what's right with their little piece of land that they really love.
Panel, would anybody like to address small landowner support?
Well, it's my understanding that, small landowners can also access those same resources, right? So NRCS, Texas Parks and Wildlife, there's probably others I'm not thinking about. And not only the expertise, the technical guidance, and they will come. I've got some neighbors of the ranch that reached out to me for that, and I connected them with our local county technical guidance biologist and the NRCS person. And so now where that went, I don't know, but I do know that they did come for a visit and provide some feedback. As far as there may be some criteria as it relates to some of the funding. I'm not sure about that, but I'm gonna put Marshall Trigg on the spot with LCRA. Marshall, the Creekside Conservation Program, is there a acreage size minimum?
No, there's not.
Okay, see, there's another program right there. So.
Yeah, just one of the tools in the toolbox, but there is not a minimum. In most NRCS programs, I don't believe there's a minimum or really a maximum either. So.
But could you handle it if all those landowners, there's a scale problem there? If we got all those landowners to come to you, you couldn't deal with all of them.
First of all, don't come to me. I am not a state or government employee. No, but that's a question for them. But that resource, it's available, and they should be able to serve that need, I would think.
Chris, as you and I have discussed over the years, there's a lot of programs either explicitly or implicitly that serve small acreage landowners. Blake mentioned one earlier, Texas Wildlife Association, small acreage, big opportunities. The Natural Resources Conservation Service is leaning more into urban and small acreage stewardship. They have urban conservationists. Texas Parks and Wildlife similarly now has urban wildlife biologists. But again, it comes back to the point from our friends in Lampasas. How do we connect quite literally the thousands and thousands of landowners moving to the hill country and the northern fringes
Good for you.
to these amazing resources? And part of it's capacity. I mean, we've had these conversations for years. Gosh, we need to be reaching out to the ranch brokers, the realtors, the developers, the builders. We need to do billboards. There's tons of great ideas out there, but if we don't have the capacity, the human time and bandwidth and sanity to implement these ideas, they're just going to be ideas. So.
And the cool part about capacity, though, is capacity can be increased. So I think that brings us back to the point about training and training our staff, training our practitioners to do all the things that, like we've got the Safe Harbor agreement that I was involved, well, I wasn't involved with it, but the one that I did research about, right? There were maybe 2 or 3 people going out there and they were enrolling all of these people by themselves. Right, but there's no reason that we can't train all the other field biologists or all the other people in that region to kind of be on the lookout for landowners that have suitable habitat, because they know. It's just the ability to get them willing to get somebody in this program or to share that kind of information, right? So the capacity of the agencies can be increased. There's a lot of really kind of like some older articles about some of the pitfalls about social science deficiencies that exist in the agencies, right? And as we get partnerships with agencies that are hiring people to do social science for them, like there's no reason that we can't see agency of the capacity of these agencies increase. So I think that is like a very promising strand that conservation social science, as it broadens out, as agencies get their own social scientists on board, we can see capacity increase. And so that we can see these kind of like the people that are best at getting people involved, the people that go door to door, we can see their capacity to do these things and to give people these opportunities increase. It may be pie in the sky, but we'll see.
Okay, we had another question back over here. Just somebody had there. Okay. Oh, in the back? Yes.
Thank you. So I think one of the take-home messages from the symposium is that there's a message out there that all juniper is bad. And I think all of us would say that that is the wrong message. And Daniel, you talked about like it would be a lot easier if we could all provide some consistent messaging to landowners. But I also think we could fall in the opposite trap of, instead of all juniper is bad, every single juniper on the landscape is good. And Carl talked about ambiguity and sometimes, and we want to provide consistent messaging, but we also need to have a message that recognizes the complexity of the landscapes that we're working in. So I'm curious if any of you all or anybody else in the audience, because we have a lot of people doing messaging out here, what are your thoughts about how do we settle on those messages that respect the complexity of the landscapes that we're working in?
Charlotte, I just want to tack on to your question, and that is also not only the complexity of the landscape, but also the goals and objectives of the landowner. I mean, let's face it, we're talking about, this is private property. Landowners have, Steve touched on it, as did many other speakers in this symposium, about it varies from landowner to landowner. So I think we have to really remember that. We have to respect that. So anyway, I just wanted to tack on. I'll let somebody else answer your question.
Well, Steve asked all the questions at the beginning. You want to just go ahead and answer all the questions that you asked at the beginning? Go ahead, Daniel.
Elizabeth, I'm curious because I know in addition to writing your book, you helped an organization sort of distill your material I mean, literally down to a brochure. So I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about that process and not just some of your thoughts about, what are some of the key basic insights we want to share, recognizing the tremendous complexity.
Well, I'm going to have to go against Blake and all of Texas when I say what I'm going to say. I don't think that the landowner's goals should be the primary first thing you think about. I think the first thing you should think about is look at your land and what can it do for you. Then you develop your goals and objectives based on what that land can do for you. Otherwise, you're trying to fit, a square peg through, or was it a circle peg through a square hole or whatever? It's like we have to really be attuned to what that land can provide for us. Otherwise, we're never going to come up with sustainable solutions. But just an answer to Daniel, that has been really, really good, is developing this, just a short little pamphlet. And y'all have been giving it out. I've been giving it out at presentations. But it's the kind of thing I spoke to is that we need to get these pamphlets into every chamber of commerce. So every time you get a new landowner, it's included as the welcome package. That's the kind of thing that we need to do. And by the way, I will come to Land Passes and do a talk. I've already been up to Bell. And so it's like a nonstop effort. We're fighting 100 years of misinformation. It's tough, but what will also be really helpful, one thing I want to do is write an article for Texas Monthly to undo the two anti-cedar articles that they wrote, one by Joe Nick Pataski, the other by Carl Solomon, is that the media, it's even appeared in the National Geographic where John Graves was bashing the cedar. It's become so part of our culture. That's what we're fighting here. And the only way to really undo it is just be persistent, come at from every different angle. Maybe get an article in the newspapers that can be all over the place, just kind of permeate everywhere because it's truth. We are preaching to the choir for the most part here. I mean, how many people came in here hating Ashe Junipers? See? I always ask, whenever I do a presentation, I always ask them before, who here hates them? About 75% raise their hand. 1 hour later, only like 2 or 3 people sheepishly raise their hand. So it's possible. We can do it. We do need to get on the same page and find like a method. One thing I was talking about during the break was with Steve, Kevin, Jim, and Carl, who doesn't know he's part of this conversation, is that it's something I've been wanting to do, is to develop a pocket field guide to teach landowners that they can take out into the field, put it in their back pocket, pull it out when they need it, put little QR code links to YouTube shorts that show, okay, this is what we're talking about. I think that kind of step-by-step thing would really kind of help explain and get people on the same page, that kind of thing.
Yes, sir.
I guess I'm left with a little, still some lingering frustration as a landowner. I came here looking for answers to what I'm trying to do on my land and get some direction on that. And it's all been super helpful, and it's opened my eyes about a lot of aspects, especially with Ashe Juniper. Unfortunately, the information just makes it more confusing, not less confusing. And I'm left feeling like I know less than I walked in knowing in terms of what I actually need to do on the land. Because I have, various aspects of the land, different ecosystems on the land, and some probably require one solution and some require a different solution. And it may even vary acre to acre. So I guess, and I'm not blaming you for pointing out that it's a complicated issue. It just is. But as somebody who does want to do the right thing, even more doesn't want to do the wrong thing, am I left in a situation where I need not just general information that might come in a pamphlet, but I need specific direction on the ground,
Yes.
on that acre-to-acre basis. Is that what I'm left with? And I guess the second part of that is, if that is the answer, then as a landowner, what is my best practical strategy for getting that kind of help? You know, the on the land, cut this, don't cut that kind of help.
Go ahead, Daniel. Go ahead.
I do consultations.
Elizabeth is great, and also there are, as I mentioned with this Kolaches and Conservation event, there's plenty of people who are based in your county whose day job every day is to help landowners. But again, to cut or not cut, to burn, not burn, and this is where Elizabeth and I think differently, which is fine and good. It's fine to have different ideas. It all comes back to your goals and your values. If you've got neighbors who do a lot of hunting and you're afraid about stray bullets, maybe you keep a big, thick, dense stand of Ashe Juniper on your borders. Maybe. Again, it just depends on what your goals, what your concerns are. You don't just cut for the sake of cutting. You don't. It really does. Carl said, what was it? Was your response maybe? It depends. It really does depend on what you want to do, what your bullseye looks like. And that may change acre to acre, or maybe it's one big vision. What your goals and visions and concerns are going to dictate what to do and not do. But that being said, I don't know if Elizabeth, you ever said it or if it's just on your card, but there are some basic things like just understanding soil health, concepts of soil health can guide you in making your own decisions. But the specifics, the nuances are going to come down to what you want for your land.
Yes, sir.
I was actually going to make a comment on, just as a landowner, some of the stuff that, and then a question for the group as well, some of the stuff that we've learned, which is that, in the early days, we'd have somebody come on our property, they'd say, do this, and then we would think we need to go immediately and do that. And we learned after 2 or 3 or 4 more meetings, when somebody would tell us the exact opposite of that thing, that maybe we need to take a little bit of time and wait till we hear kind of converging opinions. And really for us, and so I'm kind of a type A person, really for us, what that came down to was being comfortable with not doing something, right? And like just being okay with waiting to see how things develop, waiting to have those conversations, trusting nature, right? That nature's trying to tell us things and those things. And so for me, that was a huge thing, just mentally getting over that, like, I don't have to do everything and I don't need to do everything right now. The other thing too, that for us is like just having some principles around like, what are we trying to do? And so I really love that Hippocratic oath framework that Carl had around soil stability, but also just, I think, soil health, water quality, biodiversity, and minimizing hazards. I think that's a really great framework just as a landowner to think about this decision I'm about to make. How does that affect water? You can actually let old or pioneering growth cedar grow and accomplish all 4 of those things, and you can actually clear cedar and accomplish all 4 of those things in the right way, right? And so, for us, it's not an either or. I think it's about reading the land and about taking the time to really get intimately familiar. And for us, just having love for the land has attracted a ton of people to our property, and I think just that, like, just showing people that you love the land, a lot of people will show up and want to give advice. And then once you get 5 people saying the exact same thing and it intuitively feels right to you, then maybe start doing that thing, right?
Amen.
My question for the group is kind of around measuring those things. So one of the things is like, I would love to have data on organic. I saw the slide yesterday on 17% organic matter in an old growth juniper forest. I don't actually know how much
organic matter is in our old growth juniper forest. I'd love to know that data. I know there's a ton of people out there to sell me soil tests and all that kind of stuff. So I'd love to hear just from either this group or anybody else, what are some of the metrics you're measuring? I know like soil temperature, seems like a really cool one that I'd love to start measuring, but what are those metrics maybe around water, soil, those kinds of things? And then how do you think about kind of in a cost-effective way measuring those?
Well, I start off with the freebie. Pick up the soil and squeeze it. Open your hand. If you see lots and lots of ridges, it means it's really clay and compact. If it falls apart, it means it's degraded. But if it keeps a nice loose form, it means it's good. That is one of the fastest ways I just do it, is I'm going through a property. Is this good? Is this good? Something more complex is you take samples like 6 inches down, you take them home to my garage lab, and I use my Bunsen burner to burn out and determine how much carbon is in the soil and how much soil moisture and all that. But also I do assess, so that's just that. Then you can also do the infiltration using an infiltrometer. And there's a whole method of doing that, and that will determine what is your infiltration rate. You would probably want something at least like 8 inches per hour. But we do still need to get these metrics. Now, Marcus Gary with the Edwards Aquifer Authority told me that they are working on these metrics. It was still about 5 years out, but in about 5 years, because they want, they're comparing and all this. Once we can get those metrics, it's going to make it a whole lot easier.
Any friends here from the Texas State Soil and Water Conservation Board? Okay, how about Texas A&M? All right, seeing no hands. Well, the reason I bring them up is because the two agencies have kicked off a new effort called the Texas Climate Smart Initiative, which is supporting agricultural producers across the state to do, enhancing soil health, essentially. And the money comes from the NRCS, but what's unique about this initiative is that they're investing an immense amount of their program into research, the economic research in terms of willingness to pay for certain practices, but also getting that baseline data and quantifying how all sorts of different practices and all different soil types and ecoregions, what that actually ultimately is quantified to. And so that's a really neat program to look into. I loved Elizabeth's idea. You can grab a handful or you can dig a little profile. There's lots of great resources out there to just with your eye, with your nose, with your hands, how to assess the soil profile. My favorite one, and I know this is being recorded and I was hesitant to share this, is the tighty-whitey challenge. If you take a pair of cotton tighty-whities and you put them underground, I think it's like in 6 months, if you got enough soil, a good soil biological community, you should 6 months later dig it up and there should be no more cotton left on those tighty-whities. Okay. You're welcome.
There you go. How can you not end on a note like that? Wow, that's phenomenal. We'll do one more question, and then we're going to move to...
That's sponsored by Fruit of the Loom.
Todd, I just want to comment to Mr. Landowner over here that if you feel like doing some management, I think you should do it. Because I think you are. It's unfortunate that you're hearing there's a spectrum, right? And Elizabeth, I'm sorry, but you may be saying don't touch any juniper.
No, I never said that.
Okay,
My book is Wanted Dead and Alive.
Yeah, but anyway, that's what I think I heard you say that you are hearing. But
I hear that it's complicated.
yeah, it's complicated.
It is.
Yeah, and I can just share that I'm not going to stop burning. I'm not going to stop doing mechanical because guess what? I manage for black cat vireo. I'm required to do that. Because we've got a species conservation bank. So, what I'm saying is that there's certain goals and objectives that, from a management standpoint, that landowners need to have the tools in the toolbox to do. But I hope that you didn't, come out of this with, and I, sorry I called you out, but, it's not a preservationist approach.
We're doing
That's-
conservation.
It's conservation.
Yeah.
If somebody said, cut all the cedar off, that's easy. If somebody said, don't cut any of the cedar off, that's easy. The hard part is something in between, the nuance. So,
Okay, but let me just say one more thing before you ask that, is that there is one other thing, is that who's here heard of the web soil survey online? Go to that, and then what you do is you zoom into your property, and then you do an AOI window around it, and then that will show you all the different soil types. So you go to the soil type that's listed for a given area, and go down on the list, and it takes you to depth to paralithic bedrock. And most of the time, that's like 0 to 18 inches. And as a general rule of thumb, this is where I like to start. I like to start bigger picture first, and then you can tweak out more details, based on your goals and objectives. But anything that's listed, 18 inches or less, especially if it's degraded, then I'm going to want to keep more of the wooded cover on it, just because it could be in a state of regeneration. If it's deeper than that, especially if it's more open and rolling, then I'm like, that's a good contender for more open grassland. That's just kind of like a general rule of thumb that I like to start off with. And that's just kind of a good way to start.
We had a hand up over here, and she wants to share one quick thing. So this will be the last thing from the floor.
Thank you so much. You guys, I've just been really listening in this conversation and throughout the past 2 days, and I had a couple of things that I wanted to say that maybe are hearing what you guys are saying and asking for and challenging us in this room to lead the way on all of these initiatives going forward. So first, for the Symposium Planning Committee, which I'm on, so I'm not just volunteering other people, I'm volunteering myself. We are recording these sessions, and we're going to post them online, and I challenge all of us in this room and the Symposium Planning Committee to share those and talk about those and have conversations and invite your neighbors and invite the community that you're in, or share them online on social media. Let's get this conversation going and keep it going. And what I'm hearing from the landowners is you would love a silver bullet, and I wish that I had one for you, but you can always decide tomorrow to do some sort of work. The thing that you can do today, what I was hearing you saying, and what I know that you guys have done, and I know that everybody up there on the panel has been doing, and a lot of the people in this room too, is observing and connecting and learning to hear what our ecosystem is telling us. And it's okay if you're a beginner as a landowner and you have this precious place that you really want to care for, learn to listen to her and let her tell you what's going on, and have that conversation, and allow yourself to ask questions of the land and wait until you hear the answer. That's okay too. It's really awesome that you guys want to take care of your land, and that everybody in this room really wants to do what's best for the hill country and for the species and for the vegetation. That's why we're all doing this work. None of us are, unfortunately, super wealthy because of this work. So a round of applause for all of us doing this work all the time and making this world a better place.
And with that, I would like to close this out so we can actually have the conclusion.
I just want to say one thing with the landowners in here.
Sure.
It sounded like they were searching for some technical guides on the perks and all that when we do this year. And that's about 80 to 90% of what we do is work with private landowners. So if you go to the Parks and Wildlife website and look up Find Your Biologist, go to your county, because each county has their own biologist. So like I said, we work with big landowners, work with small landowners, a lot of 1D1. So if you're needing technical guidance, go to our website, Parks and Wildlife website, and just search for Find Your Biologist, and we'll help you out.
Good deal. Thank you. Can we please give a round of applause to our panel for taking the bullets here? Steve, if you'd like to start making your way up here to the front. We will make these You guys are welcome. You're released. You're released from servitude.
We're dismissed.
Yes, thank you very much, guys. Concluding thoughts. The symposium is going to take these comments and notes and go together and develop the next steps for consideration. We started out with some questions to begin this event. We're going to conclude those with the questioner. Steve?